Hi, everyone. This is Alex Schmitz. Before we get into today's episode of College Football Throwdown, I wanted to mention that we did have some technical difficulties with this episode. I was using an older portable microphone because I was away on vacation while recording this episode, and it has some pops and crackles in the audio that we didn't catch until post production. We apologize for the decrease in audio quality for this particular episode, but it will go back to its normal state by the next episode. So, once again, apologies for the audio quality, but hope you enjoy the discussion. Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 122 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Cornhusker fans.
Hello, everybody. For those who are listening to this podcast for the first time, this is College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. We're a father-son duo talking remotely. Today, I'm not actually in California like usual. I am coming to you from Molokai, Hawaii.
Because you're a star.
That's right. I'm a star, baby.
Yeah, you betcha. And I am in Apache Junction, Arizona.
There we go. Both in different locations than last we talked.
That's right.
And I'm actually here visiting with your brother AJ, who's been on a couple podcasts in the past.
Yes.
Yeah. So enjoying that here, and got to watch the football game. I think it started at like 4:00 my time because we're
Right.
a whole 5 hours ahead of the East Coast.
Right. Well, and that's just. I wish they would. If they're going to do it on a Monday instead of a Saturday, which is a whole nother conversation. But if they're going to do it on Monday, you'd think they could start it before 8:00 Eastern time, don't you? I mean, come on. But if somebody is going to that game out east, right? Because the game was played in Indianapolis. If someone's going to go to that game, they could get there by 6 or 6:30. But no, they want to be able to push it out there, and so the damn thing doesn't start till 8:00 Eastern time. So people who are watching it on the East Coast, it was well past midnight before it was over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not good for the sport.
Right. Yeah, it was actually 3:00 my time then when it happened. But before we dive into the conversation about the national championship game, we've got to stick with our tradition and crack open a beverage. I've got a Longboard Island Lager here from Kona Brewing Company.
Oh, I love Kona Brewing Company. Awesome. What? Say that again. It's a longboard what?
Longboard Island Lager.
Lager. It's a lager. Okay. That's very good. Have you had it before, or is this your first one?
No, I've had it before.
Okay.
AJ had a couple here, and I like it.
Awesome. That's cool. Well, I have a kind of a special beer tonight too. I have. So you're familiar, being from Michigan. When you come up and spend time in Traverse City, we often drink Oberons, right? Which is a summer version beer. That often is served with a citrus, like an orange slice or something like that. It's a nice beer, lighter a little bit on the lighter side, but just a good wheat beer. But this is a unique version of that, okay? And I'm going to read the description to you. It's when winter comes, snowbirds travel south. That would be me. But this lucky batch of Oberon heads to the barrel and becomes Uberon, is the bourbon barrel-aged version of our iconic American wheat ale. It's strong, spicy, and ready to cap off the night in style. So that's what I'm wanting to do here. I'm going to cap off my night in style. So, the typical Oberon is probably about 5.2, 5.5 maybe percent alcohol by volume. After aging it in the bourbon barrel, the alcohol content goes up to 11.3, which is almost like wine.
Yep. Well,
So
it's late for you, so you're finishing the night strong.
there you go. Exactly. So Bell's Uberon. Here we go. And it's a bottle for me. So
All right.
Enjoy your Kona beer. I love Kona Brewing.
Yeah, I like it too. All right. Before we talk about the national championship game, there's actually one other bowl game that happened after we last talked, which was the Texas Bowl, Kansas State against LSU. And interestingly, Kansas State won rather dominantly, actually, 42-20.
Yeah, that surprised me. And you know, again, I don't know the particulars of how many players from each team, chose to opt out and all that, which obviously can have an influence on something like that and can create scores like this even more so. But I think it's often an indication of who really wants to be there and who doesn't. And I think if you looked at the rosters, you would say, well, LSU's got way more talent. But obviously, they'd gone through a coaching change and were trying to figure things out. And they got themselves whooped because I don't think they really wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and K-State definitely did, more so than them.
Right, exactly. So
that's one of those situations which we've seen quite a bit this particular bowl season.
I agree, and it's only gonna get worse, I think, as we continue down this path of the college football playoff structure.
Well, yeah, especially if they do expand the playoff, then more teams are getting in the playoff, and it makes the other bowls even more irrelevant, and the national stage.
Right, but apparently they're not able to agree on a new number, right? Did you hear that?
I heard. Yeah. I saw something about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they left their meetings that they had. They had meetings obviously right after the national championship game. Since there's so many people in town, they go ahead and congregate some meetings to discuss some of these critical issues. And one of the meetings where they had hoped to maybe get a little closer to an agreement, they didn't. And yet they really probably need to make a decision by the end of this calendar year because because of all the contracts and getting things let out for bid and all that takes another year or so. So they gotta get the ball rolling here pretty soon. And apparently there's pretty significant disagreement on what the next step is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, yeah, the group of five has their own interests, which we've talked about before, and then there's the other conferences, and how should everything be allotted in terms of conference champions and all that stuff. So,
right.
Yeah, there's a lot to figure out. But then, of course, we've got the championship game. And on our previous podcast, we gave our predictions for the game. And I, being the optimist, as I often am, was rewarded in this particular instance because I predicted that Georgia would win 28-24, whereas you predicted that Alabama would win 38-21.
Yes. You were right, and I was wrong. But I'm happy to be wrong in this situation.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think we discussed it on the podcast, but Vegas actually had Georgia favored by 3. It was a -3.
Well, and but it ended up being -2.5 for Bama. So it opened at -3 for Georgia, but then obviously transitioned over the time from the opening to the actual game, where Alabama ended up being -2.5.
I see. So, well, I thought that initial -3 for Georgia was crazy because, Alabama spanked them so bad in the SEC championship game.
Right.
But turns out maybe Vegas knows something,
Yeah. Yep, that's true. They usually do.
So, yeah, the final score actually ended up being 33-18, Georgia over Bama. And I think we talked about this on the previous podcast, that Georgia's defense and how they would adjust compared to that SEC championship game where this vaunted, best defense in years looked silly against Bama. They couldn't get any pressure on Bryce Young, and he was just passing it all over the place. Transition to this game, though, they were blitzing a lot, being very aggressive, making Bryce Young have to step out of the pocket, and just in general doing a much better job. Shut down Alabama's rushing game almost totally. They only had 30 yards of rushing over the course of the game. So that was definitely a very marked improvement that was immediately apparent watching the game.
I totally agree, and they talked about that. I mean, the Georgia coach, Smart, talked about that both before the game and definitely after the game about the fact that they genuinely were embarrassed by that first game, and they made a commitment themselves. The players did say we're going to get ourselves in shape, and so they had some additional running. They met to do fitness running in the mornings to make sure that they would get themselves in better shape, aerobic shape before this game. They were not going to be the ones that were tired on the field in this second contest. And I think that work and that effort certainly paid off for them, along with probably more significantly, the change in philosophy that was used by the defensive staff at Georgia. They were, like you said, far more aggressive in this contest than they were the previous one. And that was helped or assisted by two critical things, which was a couple of games back, Alabama lost one of their premier receivers. And then during the game, they lost another of their premier receivers. So they were playing that game with two of the starters that they had in the previous game gone.
Yep.
At wide receiver, and that was a huge deal.
Yeah, it was. John Mechie III actually got injured in that SEC championship game against Georgia.
Okay.
So they were without him. And then Jamison Williams, he had like a nice 30-yard pass play, but it messed up his leg bad. Like, it was immediately obvious.
Yes.
And apparently he tore his ACL. That's the judgment afterwards, which frankly made me surprised that he was walking on it on the sidelines afterwards. I was like...
I agree.
Holy crap.
I agree. I was amazed when I saw him walk on his own back to the locker room. I'm like, shit. Because I saw the knee just completely pop out. Like, it separated, right? Like, when you watch that shot from the end zone, it was just so obvious. I mean, I wish they would have shown it again just so I could have pointed it out to Kim.
No. They shouldn't have showed that close up at all. That was gruesome.
Oh, it was gruesome, but it was okay. I know what happened now.
Okay, well, I'm glad you were satisfied. Alabama still, in terms of they actually out-yarded Georgia overall still. 364 for Georgia to 399 for Alabama, and 369 of that was passing it. So, they were still getting some stuff done, but having those two receivers out clearly showed there were a couple of times where Bryce Young did get a good ball to one of those receivers that was, maybe a little tough but catchable, and they dropped them. That happened a couple of times.
Exactly. I totally agree with you on that. Yep. And those are plays that, if he has his full complement of receivers, maybe those are catches instead of drops. And that changes the whole structure of the game.
Yeah. Well, and actually it was turning out to be a very low-scoring defensive game, which, of course, AJ, your brother here, was very happy about because he likes defensive battles. It was
absolutely.
It was 9-6 in Bama's favor at halftime, but frankly, Bama should have had a bigger lead because every time they got the ball and drove it, they were driving it down into the red zone, like to the 10-yard line, and Georgia each time managed to stiffen up and stop them and force them to kick field goals, whereas I remember one of Georgia's was like a 50-yarder field goal, right? So they didn't get that close that particular drive. Georgia's quarterback, Morrison, was not looking good.
No. In fact, for I would say 3/4 of the game, he didn't look good. And you and I talked. I remember we were texting back and forth during the game, and we talked about the fact that Georgia had to be pretty happy going into halftime at down only 9-6, right? Like because of what had transpired in that first half.
Yep. Well, and I believe you said in the past podcast talking about the game that the battle of the quarterbacks might be the deciding factor because clearly both teams had good defenses, productive offenses, but Alabama had the Heisman Trophy winner, whereas they had this guy who, and now I've learned since, start off as a walk-on quarterback. Really wasn't highly regarded.
And an unusual walk-on history too. He walked on because he was a lifelong Georgia fan, but then realized, I have no chance, no prayer of ever playing here, so I'm leaving, and I'm going to go to a junior college where I can play. So he went to a junior college, did really well at the junior college, and then was invited back to Georgia as a scholarship player at that point, because Georgia had had some of those talented quarterbacks leave, and they were in need of a quarterback, and they had now seen what he could do, and they all obviously knew he had some talent because he was on their team before, and so he was brought back to the fold, so to speak. So an interesting path, and but again, I initially I looked at him and I thought, well, he's just too damn small, right? He's just not a big enough guy, and he just looked very uncomfortable for most of that game. He really did. I was surprised though. After the game was over, I was watching footage, and he and Young, the Heisman Trophy winner, met at midfield and had a little post game chat. And it looks like he's the same height as the Young guy. CJ Young. I either CJ Young is much smaller than I
You
thought he
mean
was.
Bryce?
Bryce Young, excuse me, is much shorter than I thought he was, or this other guy for
Yep.
Georgia was
Stetson.
taller.
Yep. Stetson Bennett is his name.
Bennett, yeah. So either Bennett's taller than I thought, or Young is shorter than I thought, but they were about the same size.
Yep. Well, and I learned Bryce Young is only a sophomore, so
Yeah.
he's still got time left.
Yep. Oh yeah, and he'll be draft eligible after next season. But based on everything I see, yeah, I think he's going to have another very good year and probably a reasonable shot at being a two-time Heisman Trophy winner.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, so yeah, at halftime I was thinking as a Georgia fan, only down 3, you've got to see that as a positive, but they needed to make some clear halftime adjustments, right? Even at the end of the second quarter, it felt like Bama was starting to adjust to that blitzing style, that Georgia was going for on defense, right, and picking it up more.
Right, and making quicker throws.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. And I want to say it was the fourth quarter where that controversial sack of Benton happened, and then the ball came out of his hands kind of at just as he was starting to throw it, Bennett. And it was ruled as a fumble on the field, even though the ball kind of did go forward a bit. Whereas when that happened to Bama early on in the right at the beginning of the game, it was ruled as a forward pass. And so basically that got counted as a fumble. Alabama had the ball right on Georgia's 20-yard line and easily scored a touchdown there, which was their first touchdown of the whole game. And at that point they were up 18-13. There was 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and I was like, all right, this is where the fun ends, right? Bama's going to take control of this and never look back. But to Georgia's credit, they came out there, and I want to say that next drive was the one where Betson had that great pass into the end zone where the receiver, was covered pretty well, but he still caught it over his shoulder for their touchdown.
Correct. Exactly. It was very impressive. And I was thinking the same things. I was thinking, here we go again, kind of thing. I know they've got the lead right now, but Alabama's going to respond and blah blah blah. And then of course they did, but then, Georgia came back and scored again. So it's and then the other, the whole interception thing at the end.
Yeah.
I was laughing the whole time because they replayed it, and they're talking about how the coach is all excited. Coach Smart is on the sidelines, and you can see him. He's running down the sidelines trying to yell at the guy, "Go down, go down, go down." He says it like a dozen times, and of course the kid's not going down. He's like, "I'm scoring, man," which he does. So everybody's happy, but really the right football decision would have been for him to just run a little bit, get into an open space, and drop to his knees and protect the football, because it would have been game over in a safe way that way. I mean, if he had been running and all of a sudden, somebody come and tackled him from behind and popped that ball out, and then the ball gets back onto Alabama, now they still have time to maybe do something, right? So,
yeah. The smart thing, like you say, would have been to just fall down, and then if Georgia got like 1 or 2 first downs, the game would have been over at that point because there wasn't much time left.
But right, and Alabama did have timeouts left.
Yeah, but it was more exciting that way, and at that point, I was like, well, it was funny because AJ was rooting for Bama over Georgia, but I was yelling like, "It's over! Bama lost! Bama sucks!" I was happy there.
Bama sucks. Well, that's funny.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Well, and it turned out because Bama actually had one of those drives we talked about earlier where they got close into the red zone, got stopped, and then the field goal got blocked. And turned out those 3 points would have been important because we got to a point in the fourth quarter where each of them was only down by like 1 point. They were going for 2-point conversions, etc.
Right.
So having that 3 points at that point in time might have been significant.
And what does that say? Special teams are important.
Well, and I tell you what, Georgia's got some good special teams. Their punter and kickoff guy was amazing.
Yes. Well, and I was amazed because I after watching Georgia's punter, who's one of these guys that would grab the ball and then kind of look around and scratches whatever and then punt. It just seemed like he was super nonchalant about his punting, but he had his head up and he was looking at what was going on. And I thought, well, that guy is primed to be surprised by an all-out attack, blitz type of thing to go after the punter, where because his natural routine is quite slow, and 90% of the time when the normal return is on, that's okay, you can get away with that, but you damn well better be ready to speed that process up if they come after you. And I just thought that at some point Alabama was going to catch them, but they never did. Never happened.
Well, and the other reason I thought that Georgia was kind of bound to lose at some point, especially there in the first half, was that they were getting a lot of penalties. They ended up with 10 penalties for 70 yards. Most of those came in the first half, and they were at some very critical moments too.
Okay, so let's go into this now, okay, since we had some banter back and forth on this. So here's a couple of examples. So you got 2 plays, two penalties called in the game, one on offense, one on defense, both of them hands to the face, which that is a penalty that can be called against both an offense or a defensive player. And it has to do with basically someone getting their hand up into the face of the opponent in such a way that it's dangerous and or provides an unfair advantage for the one player over the other, right? But the fact is that any offensive series that lasts more than 6 plays probably has examples of offensive or defensive linemen whose hands slipped off the jersey or the shoulder pad or whatever they were grabbing of their opponent and slid up into that face mask area. Okay, it happens all the damn time. And amazingly, that was called once on offense and once on defense, but both times against Georgia. Okay, and this is my point. My point to you was that these are the kinds of examples of circumstances where these teams that are expected to be good get benefits of the doubt from referees who tend to notice things that the opponent is doing more than than they do this highly regarded team, because they don't make mistakes. They don't do these things wrong, and therefore they don't get called for them. My point is that that's the kind of penalty that could have been called more times than it was called in this game, and would have been legitimately accurate. I'm not even arguing that the 2 that were called were not accurate. They may have been. I'm not going to argue that. My point is that when you have a play that happens that often in a game, when those things don't balance out, it's frustrating as hell because I know they're happening. And if I went back and scrutinized every damn play, I guarantee you I could find them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and AJ and I talked about it a little bit because we noticed there were 2 times that a Georgia defender was basically getting there early against a Alabama wide receiver. Should have been pass interference, and it wasn't called.
Yep.
So there was some of that on both sides. But I said to AJ, well, these refs are missing some calls, but at the same time, I generally prefer refs to kind of let them play, and be a little more aggressive versus the ticky tack. We're gonna flag everything that we see,
Well,
that just slows things down.
I'm a little more nuanced than that. I don't like the just let them play mentality if it means they're not playing the game of football. The game of football comes with a series of rules. And if those wide receivers are getting hit early, guess what? That is pass interference and it should be called. But the reality is when you have 2 SEC teams which play in a league where the league officials consistently undercall that play, it's probably a good thing that that wherever the crew was from this year also didn't call it very much, because I guarantee you those kinds of plays are called much tighter in the Big Ten, generally speaking, than they are in the SEC. And I don't know where these refs were from. They may have been from the Big Ten, but
ACC.
whoever they were, okay. But okay, so they were ACC refs. But the point is that that's still pass interference. All right, it is if they got there early. If it was close, okay, then you give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe. But man, I want them to call the fouls that are actually there. What drives me nuts is when they call the ticky tack offensive holding calls, okay, or hands to the face calls, which are frankly not. They're part of the game. That's just the nature of contact. Whereas something as critical as when you arrive, you shouldn't be able to hit the player before the ball arrives on a reception, right? I mean, that makes sense. That's logical.
Right. So, well, and I will say, I remember one of the hands to the face, which is when George was on defense, and the guy was pushing up against the Alabama's player's helmet from the beginning, and then his hands slipped off, and he did it again, and on the second time, the Bama's player's helmet came clean off. So on that one, it's right. Okay, dude, if you're going to be that blatant about it, of course they're going to blow the flag.
Right. No, I understand. And that's why I'm not arguing that they shouldn't have been called. I'm just telling you, Alabama players, both on offense and defense, also had their hands and faces, but it was never called. And I believe that's that favoritism that tends to occur when people are just convinced, well, Alabama's such a great team. And within the Big Ten, I believe that Ohio State and Michigan, for example, tend to get those kinds of calls more than other teams. It's amazing how that happens to their benefit when they're playing anybody else. Okay. So there's a hierarchy that exists. It's a little bit like there used to be a thing. There's actually a book written about it called the Jordan Rules.
Right.
Okay. Which goes back to basketball and the NBA and Michael Jordan's time as, the preeminent basketball player. And there were literally rules that seemed to not apply to Michael Jordan, right? Like he could do shit. He could get away with stuff that no one else could get away with.
Well, and there was 2 Jordan rules, right? Because there was that, right. And then there was the Jordan rules that the Pistons came up with to beat him by being real physical.
Exactly, which is right, which was somewhat of a counter to the fact that before that they kept getting beat by Michael, and then it was frustrating, and so they said, "This is how we're going to do it," and they got away with it, right? So you're exactly right. But my point is, that these superstars in professional sports and certainly as teams in collegiate sports shouldn't get these benefits of the doubt just because they're a team that plays clean, and so we're going to assume that they're not going to have very many penalties. And it seems like refs go into games with that expectation, and the opposite also being true. And we've been on the other end of that over the last decade because our teams have historically been high penalized teams, Nebraska, I'm speaking of, and we tend to get more ticky-tack calls than any other team I've ever observed, and I'm tired of it. So that's why I'm sensitive to this issue.
Yeah, I'm sure you were like me and poked your head up when the refs called the defensive interference. Like the
Oh,
clapping
yeah.
stuff.
Yes. Yes.
I thought
I
that was
explained
funny.
that to Kim. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One interesting stat here. Even though Georgia was getting all that pressure on Bryce Young, they only actually had 3 sacks on him over the course of the game. I would have thought that would have
Right.
been higher. But
And most of them were late. At least 2 of them were in the fourth quarter.
right, at the
Yep.
very end when the game was over, they got
Basically over.
back to
Yeah.
him. Yeah, a couple times. But that goes to show how often they were getting back there and pressuring him to throw early or making him run.
Yes.
Which I think
Right.
exposed some of his weaknesses as a quarterback, because he did not look like the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback tonight. He made some throwing into double coverage, threw 2 interceptions. He and AJ was, when I told AJ that he won the Heisman, because AJ hasn't been following much college football, he was a little bit surprised. Like, I didn't see anything Heisman worthy out of this kid tonight.
Right. Well, the reality is that he was throwing some of those balls that you look at now and you say that's questionable, but when his 2 superstar wide receivers were healthy and playing, those were throws that where he was throwing the ball up in the air and letting his athletes go make a play, and it worked in his favor a lot throughout the season. Um, but then didn't work in the national championship game because they weren't there.
But I think a bigger factor there might be the offensive line, because we commented in that
Oh yeah,
after talk about the SEC championship game where Bryce Young had enough time to eat a sandwich back there and throw the ball with all the time his offensive line was giving him against Georgia in that game. Very much the opposite in this one.
absolutely. I mean, it was amazing to me. I was like, I had heard so much about this Georgia defensive line, and I'm watching this game, and I'm thinking, okay, either Alabama's offensive line is all Americans and on steroids or something, because they were completely cleaned up, man. I mean, there was no pressure at all. And then in the national championship game, man, yeah, those guys. Well, and there were a couple players on Georgia's defense that were truly playing possessed. They were absolutely attacking, full bar every play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, compared to that SEC game where they got tired throughout the game, and especially when Alabama was running that hurry up and stuff. This time, they were the ones that had all the energy, and Alabama was getting tired in the fourth quarter.
Yep, exactly. That is
Yeah.
true.
So yeah, congratulations to Kirby Smart. A former Saban assistant beating Nick Saban. They've been considered the best team the whole year, and was only derailed by that championship game. So, kind of nice to see them get it together, make some adjustments, beat Alabama. Of course, us two are going to be happy anytime Alabama loses, and prevents
Yes.
Saban from getting another championship trophy. I saw that I believe it was higher. This championship game had higher ratings than last year's one, but still, like, I think the second lowest in the time that the playoff has existed, which isn't too surprising to me, given that it was a rematch, 2 SEC teams, which we talked about on the previous podcast.
I think that's because the fact is the quality of that game and the suspense and interest that should have existed for a game that was that well played and that tight. That game should have garnered record viewership, but it didn't because the decisions by the College Football Playoff Committee over the course of the entire college football playoff period have slowly degraded the interest in the sport and made it into a regional Southeast dominant sport that is a regional sport. This is no longer a national sport, and they need to recognize and own that in their decisions going forward.
I will say, I think one other factor is that it was a very, defensive game in the first half, and, that both teams were kind of making some mistakes and penalties and stuff, right? And, I saw some comments on like Reddit and stuff of some people saying it was a boring game. I didn't think so because I like seeing good defense played. But compare this to, some of those like Alabama Clemson games, right, where they really were score fest and it was very back and forth on who was scoring touchdowns and stuff, right? That's what the general audience prefers, generally speaking.
Right, the non-football audience, right, exactly. And that's why almost every sport, professional or progressively even collegiate sports, have moved in the direction of changing rules to enhance offense because they think that's what interests people. But it interests people that don't understand the sport. People who understand the sport can appreciate the incredible athleticism that was going on when those defenses were stopping each other, right? And they can appreciate then the intensity and the importance of every play and every drive when getting 3 points means a lot, right? When they were getting those field goals, you felt like that was big, right? Because you knew the other team wasn't going to be giving up a lot. So I just think the perspective is wrong, and it's not what the sport at its core was about. So I don't know, but I love the play. I'm just frustrated as all get out with the sport that they've chosen to go in this path, and don't even get me started on all the things that are going on outside of the lines that are killing the sport. So
yeah.
we'll have plenty of a podcast over the course of our off season to drill down on things like NIL and the money that's now being paid to recruits and shit like that, which is absurd.
Yep. The last thing I want to say about the game, which I thought was an interesting stat, just to show how much more productive, Alabama's offense is being overall in terms of yards gained, but it didn't end up leading to touchdowns scored, is that Alabama had 30 more plays than Georgia did overall. So that shows you how much more their offense was out on the field.
Yeah, that's amazing. And 30 plays, a 10-play drive for a touchdown or for a score is considered a long drive. So you're telling me they had 3 more drives, than Georgia and still didn't get points.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, because when Georgia did, generally Georgia, either they were kind of, getting like 1 first down and then 3 and outing, or they got some sort of big play, like they got that big running play,
right? Big pass
in the third quarter, I think, that got them their first touchdown and things like that.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Switching over now to some national news.
Hey, hold on. Hold on. Now, so do you have the stats in front of you?
I've got some written down here, yes.
Oh, just some written down. Did you happen to write down first downs?
Yep. It was
how many first downs?
20 Georgia, 22 Alabama.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. And then third downs I thought was interesting. Georgia was 4 of 12, and Alabama was 9 of 20. So, Alabama almost was at 50% on third downs, but the fact that they had 20 third downs goes to show you how often Georgia was forcing them into that situation.
Right, exactly. That defense was just not making it easy.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's an impressive stat. It's also crazy that Georgia was 3 of 12 and won the game. Usually when you're 3 of 12 on third down, that means you didn't do well.
4 of 12. I don't know if I misspoke.
Oh, 4 of 12.
But
okay. But still, yeah, that's 33%.
Yeah.
That's not where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. It's true. But yeah, switching over to some national news that's happened since we last did a podcast. This one happened I think the day after we recorded, which was kind of funny. But we already knew that Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, who had been the starter and then been superseded by the young Caleb Williams, was transferring out of Oklahoma. But then it got announced that Caleb Williams, the starter, was going into the transfer portal, after having a good season for him. Which is obviously a shocker to everybody, and of course people are scrambling who are looking for a quarterback and everything. And so from what I've seen so far, it seems like there are 2 main options in terms of why he's doing this. Either he's doing this in an NFL kind of way to try to get more NIL money from some sort of Oklahoma booster, to be convinced to stay at Oklahoma, or B, he may be seriously considering going to USC, following his coach Lincoln Riley, and kind of leaving Oklahoma in the lurch. What do you think about those two?
Yeah, I totally agree with you that those would be two of the more likely scenarios. I believe it is the one where he's just trying to free agent himself and go out there and see what other and of all places, Central Michigan University, who had a good season and won their bowl game, they put together a package and threw an offer out to him of $1 million a year NIL money for him to come to CMU. Did you hear that?
I think I saw the headline about that.
Yeah. They had put together some group of investors that were willing to invest in Caleb coming to CMU.
Yeah.
Which leads you to believe that, okay, this is the beginning of a very bad trend.
Right. No. Yeah. Well, and I don't think the NIL craze has gone that far where a quarterback on the level of Caleb Williams would, willingly go to a much, less prominent school, even if they were paying him a good chunk of money, because he still wants the prestige, right, to play in front of a crowd of tens of thousands and, have that national attention and all that stuff.
I suspect he feels like he's going to get pretty close to that kind of an offer. After all the dust settles, that he's going to get that kind of compensation from Oklahoma. And he believes he'll get it and still be able to be at a big boy school.
Yeah. I mean, if Central Michigan can get that kind of money together, then one of these big, like we know for a fact Texas can, they've already started shilling out money.
Which by the way, that consortium of investors and business owners has now put together a package for all the tight ends. It's already come out about the offensive linemen. Now they've got another one with some of the same participants that have set up a program for all the scholarship tight ends at Texas. So I suspect by the beginning of next football season, every group within the Texas football program is going to have an arrangement for NIL money.
Mm-hmm.
And so these players aren't even having to go out and actively pursue NIL with a local, burrito place. They don't even have to do that. They just have to sit around and wait for this consortium to put together a package for their position group.
Yep. Well, and I saw a quote from Saban, even, I believe, where he said that Congress needs to or somebody needs to regulate this, that it's kind of out of control. And I do feel, it's a little bit suspect coming from him, because he's one of the few places that could afford to not pay as much NIL and just say, hey, you're coming to Alabama, you're going to win a national championship with me, right? He's one of the few that has enough prestige that he doesn't have to do that. But still, I think he's a more old school oriented coach, and I don't think he likes what's going on right now.
No, he doesn't, because frankly, what you've done in the past will be irrelevant if somebody else is willing to outspend you. If Alabama wasn't willing to outspend Texas and Texas A&M and other schools, it would only take a few years, a rotation of players, 5 years, let's say, and Alabama's stranglehold on getting the best talent. And it doesn't matter how dynamic their recruiters are. If they don't have the money behind it, they're not going to get those players. Those players are going to go to where the money is. I'm telling you, that's a fact. And so, he doesn't want anything. Now, why he thinks that legislators or legislating it somehow from the federal government standpoint is going to do anything is absurd. What he should have been saying or speaking to was the college presidents. They're the ones that have the ability to change this. They're the ones that were absolute weak-minded weaklings who weren't willing to address the issue of student athlete welfare and simply acknowledge that they needed to provide a stipend. You know how much easier this would have been if they said, you know what, every revenue producing sport athlete is going to get $25,000 or $30,000 a year, and every in exchange for their name, image, and likeness rights, and then that number will be evaluated on a cost of living increase every year from now on. So there'd be a little bump every year, and then the non-revenue kids are all going to get 20,000. And if they had done something like that, this would be over. Okay, and then they could have gone to their contributors and their boosters and said, "Hey, we need to create some funds and stuff to pay separate from all the other university stuff to pay for these stipends." But instead, now you've got athletes, you've got individual players making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And for an example, Texas A&M is likely to sign the number one recruiting class this year, and there is rumor that group of athletes, which between freshmen and transfers is, I think, approaching the upper 20s, maybe 30 players, is going to be splitting somewhere just short of $25 million.
Holy cow!
So they're going to be getting paid, like $800,000 a player is what they're doling out. It's stupid money. So I mean, I'm telling you, this thing went from 0 to 200 miles an hour way faster than anybody thought that was in a position of to influence it. I think these presidents totally abdicated their power and their responsibility, and they should all be collectively beaten at the stake for that.
Beaten at the stake. There we go.
They really should.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
They were stupid and they were weak. They didn't want to make a decision, so they threw it over the goddamn wall and said, "You guys do your own thing. Let's have the wild, wild west and see what happens." But they had no idea that these boosters would go nuts like this. Now, why they didn't know that? Because anybody who remembers college football from the 70s, when cheating was overtly rampant, would have known that the Wild West was not what we wanted.
Right. Yep. No, there's truth to it, and it does go to show, the pent up demand, right, that was there for these athletes' skills and everything, and when the coaches are, the highest paid public employees in the state, making $10 million a year and all this stuff, off of these players' hard work, especially for like the big star players, right? I can understand the resentment that was there before, that like, I'm doing so much for this university, and they're doing all this and I'm getting nothing. But now, like you say, we've jumped to the opposite end of the pool now. In 1 year, we've jumped the opposite end.
Exactly. It wasn't some slow progression. They weren't doing the breaststroke. No, they were doing they were flying on that water, man. I don't know what. They were in a speedboat. But yeah, and so you know what? This is a great topic for another podcast, because I have so many opinions on this, and it's just out of control. It's stupid.
Yeah,
it's going to ruin our sport, and we got to talk about the solutions too.
Yeah,
because I have some ideas that way too.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a full NIL episode here in the off season. We're going to switch over now to some Nebraska talk, because there has been quite a bit of news here in the past couple weeks. We knew that we were looking for a quarterback since Adrian Martinez transferred and everything, and turns out that we got the guy we were after, which was Texas quarterback Casey Thompson. From what I was seeing, the general consensus seemed to be that of the transfer quarterbacks that were in the portal, aside from Caleb Williams, who is clearly a shock and isn't going to Nebraska in any circumstance, Casey Thompson was the best probably that we could have gotten. So it seems like it was a good win for Scott.
Yes, absolutely. He was the target for sure. And I thought even when he came out into the portal, I thought he was a 1-year guy. But I now have learned and understand that he has 2 years of eligibility left. which if he chose to use both of them could be really valuable to us because it allows him to really reap the benefits of the other big uh, uh, get from the portal, which was a wide receiver from um, who
LSU.
was from LSU, who was a 5-star coming out of high school, and has really got some tremendous skills. And but it only had modest success at LSU so far. But could be a huge difference maker for us, both in the receiving game and in the punt and kickoff return game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's LSU's wide receiver Trey Palmer that we also got, and then just recently here in the past couple of days, the Texas A&M running back DeAndre Jackson.
Yes.
Yep.
Now DeAndre was a less highly regarded guy. He was a 4-star on a one site at least, and but he was a 3-star on Rivals, and kind of not. Regarded as good, but not a great get. But is built in a way that I think is the kind of player that we want. He's about 215 pounds, 5'11", 6 foot tall. I mean, he's big enough to handle the rigors of the Big Ten, but hopefully has enough speed and vision and shift to make it real. He comes from Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is a perennial power and source of enormous number of Division I athletes. So he's played at a very high level going back to early in his high school days because he's been playing against some real talent. So I think he's got a couple of years left. In fact, at least 3, if not 4 years of eligibility. So he's almost like a freshman.
That is good. Yeah. And then to cap things off for Scott Frost here, we had our defensive line coach. This was previous to this. I don't know if we mentioned on our last podcast, but our defensive line coach, Tony Tuiati.
Yes.
Thank you. I forgot again.
Yes.
Darn Hawaiian names, and I'm here in Hawaii.
Yes. I know. You got to go talk to somebody about that.
But he left for Oregon, and we had kind of talked in a previous podcast about how maybe Scott was kind of almost hoping for that in a way because it let him shift some people around on the defensive side of the ball to handle different responsibilities, to open up a spot for a special teams coach, which we've been begging for weeks now. And turns out that's what he did. Bill Bush is no longer an analyst. He's going to be a full-time special teams coordinator. And then Mike Dawson has been moved from outside linebackers coach to handle the defensive line.
Now, and keep this is another something about Mike Dawson. So he was one of Scott's original staff. Then he left to take a job with the New York Giants of the NFL, I think, for a year or maybe 2. But he was going back because he was 1 year short of getting retirement benefits from the NFL for being an assistant coach, meaning he had already been in the league in his career, except he was 1 year short of the number of years you needed to be eligible for retirement. And so he went back to New York, but then when we had an opening the following year, he came back to Scott's staff, but the opening was for outside linebacker. But he had previously been our defensive line coach and done well, actually, because in the first, you'll recall that our defense was pretty good in the first year of Scott's tenure, and then Shenander has just kind of built it from there. So Dawson is a guy that Scott was very familiar with. That was the defensive line coach at UCF with him. So this is going to be a natural fit for him to slide down to the defensive line. It's probably a good thing from a coaching perspective. Now, Tuiati was a very good recruiter and was responsible for some of our better defensive line recruits that we've gotten here in recent years. So we're going to miss him on the recruiting trail. But the good news is Bill Bush, who is our new special teams coordinator, is also known as an outstanding recruiter and has connections both in Louisiana and the Midwest, Nebraska and the Heartland, and has successfully recruited in this area. So I expect big things out of Bill Bush as a full-time assistant coach as well.
Yep. Yep. And as we had mentioned on many previous podcasts, since special teams was so bad this year, it felt like an obvious sign of improvement, for us in that regard would be to get a full-time special teams coordinator, especially when you have one who's talented in that regard on your staff already as a analyst or whatever. So I was very glad to see that announcement. That basically now only leaves the question of who is going to take over those responsibilities as the outside linebackers coach and who our running backs coach is going to be. But I would say so far here in this offseason, between the transfers Scott's been able to bring in and then these changes on the offensive coaching staff and bringing in Bill Bush for special teams and everything, Scott's been doing what I've been wanting to see him do. So I think there's some positivity in the Husker fan base about that, which was sorely needed.
I would agree. I would agree with you. I think that's a good assessment, Alex. I think we've done a lot of the things that he needed to do, especially understanding the limitations. I mean, he's not going to be able to go out and get the AAA plus guy to join his staff when he's a lame duck, right? But he was able to exceed that expectation, frankly, a little bit with the guys he's been able to hire so far. And I think we have enough talent. Boy, if you look at like Trey Palmer and then the guys we already have in the program, and now we've got a quarterback who, if you watch Thompson's film, I mean, that guy can throw it 65 yards on a dime. He really does have a strong and reasonably accurate arm. So if we can have an offensive line that comes together and is able to block and keep the people away from him long enough for this kid to do his thing, he's going to have some receivers to throw to, and he's going to look pretty good doing it. So I'm kind of excited about what our offense could be. And now my whole focus, based on all the recruiting and everything, as well as the players we have on campus already on the team, it's all about the offensive line at this point. I think the skill at running back, wide receiver, tight end, it's all good enough to be really good collectively on offense. It's all about the offensive line. And then defensively, our secondary, we lose a couple of really talented and experienced safeties, and we lose a corner, but we had some depth at corner, and we had some great young safeties that were frankly waiting for their turn. So I'm fairly confident. Both, I think our secondary coach is outstanding, and I think we have enough talent that we're going to be fine in the secondary. We're returning quite a number of our linebackers, except for JoJo Doman, and obviously he was great. I mean, all Big Ten and everything, but I think that they're going to be solid at the linebacker position, with 3 returning starters in the middle, one coming off of a redshirt year because he was injured, and so it's all about the defensive line and the offensive line. If the lines improve and are able to solidify themselves, we could be a decent football team next year.
Mm-hmm. If Scott could go out right now and get one really good recruit for the offensive line, what position would you want him to get?
Wow. Well, we lost Cam Jurgens at center. So if there was a center in the portal who was exceptional and at their previous school and still had a year or two of eligibility left, I would say that would be number one, and number two would be a left tackle. Now we have some very highly recruited players, some top 100 rivals, top 100 type of players at offensive tackle, but they have not panned out. They are not getting it done. And I don't know if that's because they were overranked, so to speak, in that they don't have the foot speed to do what needs to be done, but our offensive tackles were atrocious this year. Now they were young; they were sophomores and freshmen. So I'm hopeful that a year of experience and another year in the program, strength training, all that, and just repetitions, they're going to look a lot better. Because supposedly everybody and their brother thought they had the talent coming out of high school. So it's not that they lack talent.
Right.
But if anytime you can get a good left tackle, you take it. So it would be center or left tackle.
There we go. And in regards to Casey Thompson, I was just going to mention that, there were a lot of plays this year where we had receivers that were open, right? Showing that Scott's offensive system was working, but then Adrian would often overthrow them, right? Or, Adrian couldn't be accurate.
Or just not see him.
With the long ball, right, or not see him. Right. So if we can get a quarterback, who has protection, as you mentioned, that's very important, but who has a decent amount of protection and then can actually be more accurate than Adrian and hit those open receivers, then, a lot of these games where we lost by 7 points could go the other way.
Right. Yep. Keep in mind, if we score one more touchdown in every game, we're 11-1.
Well, yeah, that's an easy thing to say, but it's true. It's true. Well, and I was talking with AJ a bit too as I was showing him the schedule for next year, and Game 6 is the critical point for Scott, right? Because that's where his contract says that his buyout goes way down, and we fight our non-conference opponents. We have Northwestern at the Ireland game, right, to start things off. We play Oklahoma at Game 4, but it's at home this time. And Oklahoma clearly is having some dysfunction, with all these players leaving and everything.
Right.
And then I think we play like Rutgers and Indiana in Games 5 and 6. So with all these changes and everything, Scott really should be like 5-1, 4-2 by that Game 6. If we're not, he's in trouble.
Well, I would say if he's 4-2, he's probably in trouble. Yeah, I think I genuinely think he needs to be 5-1 because I've got that right in front of me, so I can give you because I want to parlay that into the next conversation. So we do the Northwestern game out in Dublin, and then we play. I don't know who it is. Is it North Dakota?
I think so.
I think it's North Dakota, and then we play like maybe Southern Miss or somebody, and then OU. So, and those are all home. So all of those home games.
Well,
first 4
not
games,
the Dublin game, but
not the Dublin game, but the other 3, and then the first Big Ten game, Indiana is also home. So out of our first 5 games, we have the Dublin game and then 4 home games.
Right.
Okay. And then Rutgers after that. Now Rutgers is a very, very talented team who played really well this year and has had the best recruiting class in forever for them. So they are going to be a team loaded with talent, and we got to play them at Rutgers. And if we go into that game 4-1, having let's say beaten Northwestern and then lose to OU, if we're 4-1 and in that game, man, Rutgers is going to fight their tails off to beat our ass, right? But we damn well better win that game and be 5-1 at that point.
Right.
If we're not, we're in trouble.
Because I remember looking at the schedule, and we do have some bye weeks in there, but our last 4 games are our hardest games because we play like Minnesota into
Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Yeah. So
with no bye weeks.
Right. So so it's like we better get a good record before then because that stretch is going to be hard.
Exactly. And we play Illinois before Minnesota, and keep in mind Illinois is a team that, although they didn't have a lot of talent, they overachieved because they have a good coach who understands how to play fundamental football, which is something that Scott is yet to demonstrate. And we got to play them the week before that. So it's Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. That's a tough final stretch after our second bye week. Now, I since we're on schedules, schedules just got tweaked by the Big Ten because of all the weird shit that happened over the last couple of years with COVID. They tweaked a few things, but let me give you Michigan's schedule.
Okay.
Okay, they because they're the defending Big Ten champions, and they play Colorado State, Hawaii, Connecticut, Maryland, Iowa, Indiana, then Penn State, then a bye week, then Michigan State, Rutgers, Nebraska, Illinois, and then Ohio State. Now tell me that doesn't produce at least 10 wins, if not 11 wins until you play Ohio State.
Right, because their two
I mean,
crossovers are us
are
and
us and Illinois,
Illinois.
and yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean,
And then they're
and Iowa, and Iowa, that's the third one.
right, and their non-conference doesn't have anybody that should really challenge them.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
right. And their first 4 games are at home. Their first away game is the Iowa game in October.
Right. Yep. A good schedule for them.
You can't. Yeah, I was just speaking with our friend Brian, who's been on the podcast a few times and is a Michigan fan. He said, I think this might be the easiest schedule we've ever had in terms of the path. Because they had in the past, they would have historically been playing, a highly ranked Notre Dame or, some other big name school, one of the USC, UCLA, Washington, that sort of deal, or maybe a Miami or a Florida State. None of that. And this schedule is powder puff for Michigan. So if they aren't going into that Ohio State game, at least 10-1, they're greatly disappointed. Right? They probably should be 11-0 going into the Ohio State game.
Right, and we didn't touch on it much, but there have been rumors that Jim Harbaugh may be going to the NFL, which have happened in the past and are still continuing to happen, which seems crazy to me given his great success at Michigan this year. But you were making the point that with that kind of schedule next year, he'd be crazy to leave because he's got a good path to make it to the Big Ten championship again.
Absolutely, and if he does that, even if he didn't win the Big Ten for a second time in a row, let's say he only went 11-1 because he loses to Ohio State, and then Ohio State is the Big Ten champion or whatever. The fact is, 11-1 is still 11-1 in the eyes of, and so if NFL teams are viewing him and suiting him this year, they'll be doing it with much bigger numbers in a year from now. So he would be dumb to leave right now. That would be crazy. Mm-hmm. He needs to stay at least one more year, and then if the NFL comes calling and that's what he wants, that will be the time for him to jump ship.
Right. Yep. Makes some sense. So, all right. Well, This is the end of the college football season for this year. It was a disappointing season for Nebraska, but as we mentioned, there have been a lot of changes in this offseason, new players, new coaches, etc. So we'll definitely be looking forward to that spring game, to see some of this new talent on the field for the first time.
And the new offensive coordinator, right? Whipple is going to be on display in the spring game.
That's true. And as we mentioned, we'll try to keep it to maybe monthly podcasts here and talk about some of these broader things going on in college football, like NIL, the transfer portal, future playoff expansion, things of that nature. So there's plenty to keep us busy here.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Regretfully, most of it will just get me into a rant, which of course I think the listeners kind of like when I lose it a little bit, but yes, we are in a major area of transition, and I'm going to make a prediction that I think the instability of conference realignment is going to bubble up pretty significantly here as well. You can already feel the tremors going on in the group of five type of conferences. But I think that group of five stuff is going to really start to percolate even more as teams try to position themselves better for whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and those, like you said, the fact that these negotiations over the future of the playoff, right, are ending in disagreement, goes to show that there's definitely some behind the scenes things going on there.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, if you out there enjoyed listening to this, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'd love you to leave a review there. Let us know what you think of the podcast. Leave a comment, all that good stuff. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you for joining me for this episode, Dad. And until next week, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
I guess I should say next month.
Yeah, that's okay.
Gotta revise it.